Hi everybody, Jacob Reed here from ReviewEcon.com. Today we're going to find out how a change in deposits in one bank account can ripple through the entire banking system to become new amounts of loans, money, and checkable deposits. If after watching this video you still need a little more help, head over to ReviewEcon.com and pick up the Total Review booklet. It has everything you need to know to ace your microeconomics and macroeconomics AP exams. Let's get into the content. First thing we're going to do is look at how fractional reserves can change the money supply using the bank balance sheet that you should have already learned. For this example, we're going to assume that there is only one bank in this entire banking system. So we will see changes in this bank balance sheet, and we will assume that this is what's going to happen in the overall banking system because of one change in a deposit. First of all, we're going to assume that Terry deposits $1,000 into his checking account. On the liability side, we're going to see an increase of $1,000 of demand deposits, and we're going to assume here that the Federal Reserve has set a 10% reserve requirement. That means over on the reserves side of the bank balance sheet, we're going to see an increase of 10% of that demand deposit, $100 in required reserves. The rest of the money that Terry deposited will go into excess reserves. This is the money that the bank can loan out. The $100 of required reserves cannot be loaned out. This is why it's called fractional reserves. Fractions of the deposit can be loaned out, and those new loans will be brand new money within the economy. So let's say the next day Wendy goes to that bank and borrows that $900 of excess reserves to pay for a car. That means that $900 of excess reserves will disappear and become $900 of loans. Wendy will pay those back, so they stay on the asset side. The next day, the car dealer that receives the $900 from Wendy, Kyron, will deposit that money, $900, into the bank. And since Kyron's going to put it in his checking account, that's going to increase our demand deposits to $1,900. And now we have a new amount of required reserves. 10% of the $1,900 of demand deposits is $190 worth of required reserves. The rest of that $900 deposit, or $810, is excess reserves that the bank can loan out. The next day, Caleb heads into that bank and borrows that $810 for a brand new computer. That shifts our $810 from excess reserves into the loans category, bringing our total loans to $1,710. Now Ken, the computer store owner, will take that $810 and deposit it in his checking account. That brings our demand deposits up to $2,710, and we will balance it out on the asset side by changing our required reserves to $271 and increasing excess reserves with the rest of that new deposit to $729. That $729 can of course now be loaned out. That original $1,000 deposit made by Terry has now become $2,710 worth of total deposits. That's $1,710 worth of brand new money that was created through the fractional reserves system. So that's $1,710 worth of brand new loans, and that is where the new money came from. Those loans created that money. Of course, this example is not going to stop there. That $729 of excess reserves will continue to be loaned out, redeposited, loaned out, redeposited over and over and over again. Each time, 10% of that money showing up in the required reserves and a little bit smaller amount being re-loaned out, creating newer money. That leads us to something called the Money Multiplier. The Money Multiplier tells us how many dollars worth of new loans, deposits, and money can be created from a bank's excess reserves. The formula for the Money Multiplier is 1 divided by the reserve requirement. That's the percentage of checkable deposits that the bank cannot loan out, and it's set by the Federal Reserve. A 10% reserve requirement will give us a multiplier of 10. A 20% reserve requirement will give us a multiplier of 5, and of course there are other possible multipliers that you are likely to see on your exam, especially your AP exam where you're not allowed to use a calculator. And once you've calculated the money multiplier, you can take the money multiplier and multiply it by a bank's excess reserves. That will give you the new money, loans, and deposits that can be created from those excess reserves, given the reserve requirement from the Federal Reserve. Now, after you have calculated that total amount of new money, loans, and deposits, you will also need to look at the original amount and decide whether or not it must be added in as well if it's part of the question. Let me show you an example. So let's look back at that original deposit of $1,000, which gave us $900 worth of excess reserves. With a 10% reserve requirement, we have that multiplier of 1 divided by 10%, which is 10. We have $900 worth of excess reserves. That means we will have $900 times 10, $9,000 worth of new loans that can be created. Now we have to ask ourselves, was that original $1,000 a new loan? Nope. That original amount was not a loan, so we're going to stick with the $9,000 of total loans that can be created from Terry's $1,000 deposit. Now for new money that can be created, we're going to again take that $900 of excess reserves, times it by 10 for the multiplier, giving us $9,000 of new money that can be created. And again, we're going to ask ourselves if that original $1,000 was new money. It was not new money because Terry took $1,000 of cash, which is part of the M1 money supply, and put it in his checking account. Cash is part of the M1 money supply, and checkable deposits are also part of the M1 money supply. So cash went down by $1,000, checkable deposits went up by $1,000. The net effect is no change in the M1 money supply. And that will be the case anytime somebody takes cash and puts it in their checking account. No immediate change will occur in the money supply. And so we're going to stay at $9,000 that can be created from Terry's original $1,000 deposit. Now on to deposits, we're going to take the excess reserves of $900 and multiply that by 10 to give us $9,000 worth of new deposits that can be created. And now we have to ask ourselves, was that original $1,000 a deposit? Well, yes, it was a deposit. Literally a deposit. So we're going to add that $1,000 to our $9,000 worth of new deposits, giving us a total of $10,000 worth of deposits that are created from Terry's original deposit of $1,000. Once all the multiplication has happened, here's where we will be. We will have $10,000 worth of demand deposits in the banking system after all of the multiplication. And required reserves will be that $1,000 original deposit made by Terry. And we will have $9,000 worth of total loans. And here is where the banking system equalizes. No more money can be created. And so total reserves have only increased by the amount of the initial deposit, despite all of the multiplication through the banking system. Next, we're going to talk about open market operations. That's where the Federal Reserve buys or sells bonds to expand or shrink the money supply. In this example, we're going to look at the Federal Reserve buying $1,000 worth of bonds on the open market. That means they're buying the bonds from anyone who's willing to sell them. When the bond dealer sells that bond, they will have $1,000 and they will deposit that $1,000 in their checking account. That means we will have $1,000 worth of demand deposits with a 20% reserve requirement this time. That means $200 will be in required reserves and the rest, $800 will be in excess reserves. Since we have a 20% reserve requirement this time, our multiplier is 1 divided by 20%, 5. And our excess reserves here of $800, we're going to multiply that by the multiplier of 5 to find out we will have $4,000 worth of new money, new loans, and new deposits. And now we have to ask ourselves if the original amount of $1,000 should be included in these totals. Was that original $1,000 new money? Well, when the Federal Reserve held those funds, they were not money. Now they are in checkable deposits. And now they are part of the M1 money supply. And so we're going to add that $1,000 bond purchase to the new money that is created. And that brings us to a total of $5,000 worth of new money that can be created from that purchase of $1,000 of bonds by the Federal Reserve. Now on to loans. Was that original $1,000 a new loan that was created? No. So we're going to leave loans at the original $4,000. And for deposits, was that original $1,000 a brand new deposit? Yes, because the bond dealer deposited that $1,000 in their checking account. As a result, we're going to increase the new deposits from $4,000 up to $5,000. Now, one final example, let's say that instead the Federal Reserve buys $1,000 worth of bonds directly from this bank. How will that impact the liabilities and assets? Well, we're going to take $1,000 worth of securities, that's another term for a bond, and that money goes directly into excess reserves. There is no reserve requirement on bonds, and so we're not changing the required reserves. We're going to take that $1,000 worth of excess reserves, multiply it by our multiplier of 5. That gives us $5,000 worth of new money, loans, and deposits. So was that original $1,000 brand new money? The answer here is no, because when the Federal Reserve holds it, it's not money. And now it's in excess reserves. Well, reserves are not money. They are part of the monetary base. M0 is what you may see it as. And was that original $1,000 a new loan? Again, no. We're sticking with $5,000 here. And finally, was that original $1,000 a new deposit? Again, the answer is no. And so we're going to leave the new deposits created at $5,000. Now, one important thing you need to realize about the money multiplier is that these are maximum changes in the money supply. In reality, they will actually be lower than what we see here. And that's because some banks do not loan out all of their excess reserves, and that will diminish the actual multiplier. Also, some citizens will actually hold cash rather than checkable deposits. And if they aren't putting their money in the bank can't loan it out and create more money, loans, and deposits. As a result, the actual multiplier is lower than what we see here. And there you have it. That's everything you need to know about the money multiplier and the expansion of checkable deposits through the fractional reserve system. If you want to practice a little bit, head over to reviewecon.com and try out the money multiplier game. And if you still need more help, head over to reviewecon.com and pick up the Total Review booklet. It has everything you need to know to ace your microeconomics or macroeconomics AP exams. That's all for now. I'll see you guys next time.